I know that you are also someone who, as some of our colleagues say, do a buzzer beater, where it's like, you know the clock is ticking and you know you have to make the shot before the clock runs out. And that can inspire some really amazing work, but it's also kind of a stress generator. And then sometimes we find energy from that stress, which can be both a pro and a con, right? So I'd be curious what your take is on that.
Absolutely. So when it comes to editing as like a task with a deadline, I think to your point about being rushed, for example, whether it's a homework assignment or whatever other deadline you may have, editing is very similar where oftentimes I would argue that having a tight editing deadline is not a good thing creatively, because then you just have to rush, and rushing makes things less perfect, right? Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but it's more likely to create a result that's further away from perfect than you would like it to be as the creative, right? But at the same time, I think in certain scenarios, in many scenarios actually, it's like, I feel like it's 50-50. Having a tight editing deadline is actually extremely helpful. So for instance, when we did our first month-to-month series, or the first 2 projects for month-to-month in December, because I was out of the country and I'd come back and people were dropping out left and right, I had to reschedule both shoots to be shot on December 30th, edited on the 31st, and delivered that same day. So both of those videos were like an extreme buzzer beater, to say the least, right? So that was like, all the scheduling didn't work out between the artist and the fashion brand prior to that, even though I had time, but I couldn't do anything because I had no footage to work with, right? So I think having the buzzer beater really just kind of forces you to like create your own correct answer, right? Even though there's no necessarily wrong or right answer when it comes to editing, especially for the music video, I had much less of an idea of what I wanted it to look like in the editing room versus the fashion video. The fashion video, I came up with the whole concept, and just because like the pre-production process was different as well, I had worked with the client to just know exactly what I wanted the edit to look like before we even shot it. So to me, that was a lot easier. But for the music video, for example, the artist was a lot more free-flowing, a lot more spontaneous, and he didn't really have a very particular plan on how we wanted to execute everything, and neither did I. So when it came to the editing room, it was a lot of just like, I was definitely in a rush, but I also think I put out a lot of decent work that I was very happy with in terms of the results. So
that's a great feeling. I mean, I can completely understand that, especially there's something magical about knowing that your constraints are either a budget constraint, a time constraint, but knowing a constraint, recognizing it, and then optimizing around the constraint often gives you really magical results.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's something that we can use as creatives as a tool.
Yeah.
As long as we identify that and then, lock in on it, so to speak.
Exactly.